am Apostle Cheryle L. Richardson, and I am the CEO and founder of Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. Our entire focus and purpose is to ignite hearts, inspire minds, and safeguard destinies as it pertains to domestic violence. We're calling this domestic violence and an advocate's unique perspective, their unique vantage point. Now, some of us have personal histories of domestic violence, and we will share as much as we are comfortable sharing in a public forum. Others may not, but we're all passionate. We're all passionate. And what I'm excited about is the various vantage points. We are in different parts of the country. We approach this problem, this issue, this pandemic from our own unique perspective. And everything that each one of us does is important. Sivan Walker is going to help us to moderate this today, as well as Karis Gamble will also be assisting. You all feel free to share this on all of your social media platforms. I know that we're going to come away with some really powerful, impactful information, and I'm excited about what I expect to learn today as we do this. And so we're going to go to our moderator, Sivan Walker.
As advocates, what is one very important thing you want victims to know about your job as you're helping them? And two, what one important thing would you want someone who's contemplating on becoming an advocate to know?
I'll answer the second part of the question. For someone who's considering becoming an advocate, I'd say get as educated and do as much research as possible. I know that just because we're survivors, just because we've experienced something doesn't necessarily mean we're equipped to therefore go help others. I know that me and Cheryle talked about this too. Like when I went through my master's program, we had to get counseling. You can't be a therapist and you weeping, they're weeping. It's a mess,
Right.
And so get the help that you need so that you can help others adequately. And take off your bias, take off your own hat of what you were raised to believe or what you see around you or what you think is right, what's morally right or wrong, or what your own personal compass, because if you do, you only can see through your own lens of knowledge, unable to see that domestic violence happens to everyone in different places all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Am I frozen? No, I'm not frozen. Okay, in all over the world. And so it's important to recognize, and it's important to make sure that you take care of yourself. And if you just because, meanwhile, I do believe that those who have survived abuse are make the best advocates because we've been there, but we have to heal. Otherwise, you're healing while trying to help others heal, and then things become confusing. And so we always want to help, we always want to be there, but you got to do the work on you before you can help others do the work on them. That would be my answer.
Right. And often that's ongoing. That's an ongoing working ourselves that we have to do, because every once in a while you come up against a case or a set of circumstances that is particularly challenging, and we become triggered by what they're experiencing. And we might think that, I dealt with that until it appears in the form of someone that we're trying to help, and it's like, whoa, I thought I had handled that. I'm feeling all kinds of things right now, So for me, it's important. Self-care is absolutely important, but also not making our own experience the litmus test by which all other experiences are judged.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The fact that I went back 5 times and now you're working on time number 8 and we're all individuals, right? So we have to stay open and participate in things like this where we can hear from other advocates and view this from other perspectives and maybe hear things that will help us to be encouraged as we move forward. And we're trying to help others, but being aware of what your biases are, that's important. Being aware of where your blind spot is, that's also important. And if there's an area in which you don't need to deal with it at all, then referring it to another advocate, connecting them with someone who's not struggling in the area that you're still trying to heal in is really, really, really important, I think, as well.
So I wanted to know, as advocates, do you guys think for those who would like to potentially become advocates, do they need to first, well, not do they need to, but do you think they should already have the experience of domestic violence before becoming an advocate?
Let me say this. I don't think that it needs to be a requirement. I think that you can care and be passionate about something without having suffered through it yourself. But it's so ugly that probably someone who wants to become an advocate knows someone who's been a victim. They've witnessed it in childhood. So vicariously, even if it wasn't directed at them personally, they've been in that environment. They know how detrimental that it is. You know, it's kind of like saying, I used to run substance abuse programs. It's kind of like saying, well, you have to have first been a crack addict in order to be a good counselor. Well, no, I just need to understand how detrimental crack is to the human body and to, and to the human mind, right? So I don't think that you had to have experienced it. I think it's a plus if you have. I think it's a plus that you have, because then nothing is wasted. Your experience, what you've gone through, is not wasted, and some good can come from it, something that you've already experienced. So that's just my own personal, we've got other illustrious advocates on here and they may feel differently, but I don't think there has to be a requirement.
But Karis, that's such a great question, because there might be people who listen to this and think, how can I help? But what you do in asking that question is you highlight how pervasive this is, that people need to understand the pervasiveness of it, because inherent in your question is somebody's experienced. Well, we know the statistics, right? Some say 1 in 4, some say 1 in 3 with women. But shame, as I said before, that goes through the roof. If I take my own experience from people across the world that I decided for myself, I'm going to talk to people, or because once people find out what I do, people talk to me. If I look at a random 300 friends that I reach out to and ask them questions, 90% of those women have experienced some form of abuse. They either couldn't label it growing up. I mean, I've had people who've endured child abuse. When I talk to them and you can see the light bulb go on in their face and they're like, well, that was my life. I was just trying to keep my siblings from being hit. I was just trying to make it okay in our house so my mom wouldn't get hit. And they were so busy growing up in that environment, just trying to fix things, that they didn't have the vocabulary until they got older and knew what it was to say, this is abuse. And this crosses, these statistics cross socioeconomic lines. It crosses race lines. It crosses, and just the ugliness is in every dynamic of the human race going around the world. And if we get people involved in that, in learning the language and being able to label what is happening to them, then we get people who, like Cheryle said, they've experienced it in some way that they want to turn around and help. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people to pull from. So for people in the world to have to step up and do that, chances are they've got something in their background that they've experienced it. And they're just now finding the vocabulary to it. And that is something I think is really difficult for us to get across as advocates. People say, well, what do you mean you didn't understand what was happening to you? What do you mean you lived that for 8 years and you didn't figure out he was abusing you? No, because abusers target really smart, really empathetic, really people who are genuinely kind. And I say to people, don't you, when someone claims to love you, believe them? And then if something bad really, really happens and they apologize, you believe it's not going to happen again? Except with abusers, it does. And before you know it, because you're smart, because you're talented, because you're used to fixing things, you've invested 8 years in fixing it and trying to neutralize your entire life so it doesn't happen again, until you realize you've been dismantled from the inside out and you've kept going back to try to fix it again. Right. So yes, until I had the knowledge and even the physicality of what he was doing to me, I would not have labeled me as being abused. I was just really in love with a man who got stressed out.
Who had issues.
And had issues. Exactly.
How do we bring awareness to the fact that a lot of us do not realize what abuse is spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, sexually, even in all those aspects that abuse exists. How can we bring awareness to that fact that this is abuse?
I-
Go ahead,
I'll
Cheryle.
answer real quick and then I'll pass it off to Miss Misty. I think it's to keep talking about it. I think it's to put that wheel of power and control into every junior high classroom. That wheel of power and control of abuse into every high school. It should be mandatory taught. It should be in police precincts. It should be for therapists. Therapists should have it because as much as we talk about religion and those dynamics, therapists do it. I mean, I went to therapy and we had gone to therapy because I finally convinced him over an instance where he woke me up driving in the car by screaming in my face and proceeded to just, as he's driving, abusing me. And I'm cowering, going, please stop, please stop. We went to the therapist and she said, well, don't you think you could try to not fall asleep in the car? It sounds like it makes him mad. What? So if we don't talk about and put that wheel of power and control into everybody's hands so they understand, so that they know the language. If we call it out when we see people in kindness to friends and say, hey, I adore you. I want you to know I'm here. I want you to know I see this happening in your life. And if you want to get into a definition, this is what it is. I can't tell you the number of people who come to me and say, I couldn't have labeled it, but I knew something was wrong. Even that. Even that. Because if you can open it up and say, but they have the knowledge to know about this wheel of power control, can open up and say, I can't label it. I wish I could provide you evidence, but I don't. I just think he's bad. I just think something's not right. Then we have to keep speaking up about it. I think that's the way to do it, and then teach it in schools. But we have to realize we have to keep talking, as all of us are here today, about how pervasive it is, because you never know. I lived in a 5,000 square foot house and my abuser was the VP of a top company in the region, and no one would have thought it.
And possibly
We can't stop talking.
Yeah, communication is key, and possibly lowering the age in which we start sharing, because even the elementary school children are having conversations about abuse, not knowing that it's wrong and that it is abuse.
Yeah.
You're so right.
That's why the Man Up movement to me is such a valuable program. It has become very, people are becoming aware of it here in Alabama. And so it has become newsworthy. It has been on the news. And when I get a teenage boy comes on the news and talks about the Man Up movement and talks about this lady talked to him and it touched something in his heart, that right there, my friends, is what I feel like is a win. I've won. So if I can touch every single one of them kids, I had parents messaging me, what you've done for our son, and you talk to our kids about this. We are so, so grateful to you for what you're doing, because the things that I do, which this has nothing to do with the subject, but I do everything on a volunteer basis. I don't get paid. I get paid in glory of God and through my heart to say that I'm winning, because there's been so many people ask me before, don't you want revenge, for your abusive part, your abuser? And I'm like, no, I want him to see me win. I want him to see me conquer what I need to conquer. And as long as I've got a voice to speak, my podcast will always be spoken on. My platform will always be spoken on. Young men will be educated as long as I'm here. And that's my main goal in life, is to bring awareness to domestic violence. It's my undying passion, and I'm going to do it until I'm no longer here to do it. So, it's about speaking up. We cannot stop talking about it, no matter how shameful people in the community are about it. Oh, they judge people, because they have perfect lives, or they think their life's perfect. So they judge other people because of what they're getting put through. because, okay, they married somebody at 17, 18, but they never had an abusive relationship. So they don't understand
Right.
that Sally that they went to school with was abused brutally. They can't understand that. So we got to make them understand what this is
Yeah.
and how we can do things to prevent things from happening and how we can help our communities and victims and survivors. So that's my answer.
Yeah. We have to
I
keep
like,
going. We have to
yeah.
keep going, and we have to
Mhm.
keep talking, and we have to encourage one another when we're feeling discouraged or feeling somewhat depleted or whatever. And the thing about COVID-19 is this: it's a pandemic, right? The United Nations declared domestic violence a pandemic back in 2017, and nobody knew what the heck a pandemic was. It didn't mean anything. You didn't get a visual of a number of people or anything, because what the heck is a pandemic? But now, who doesn't know that COVID-19 is a pandemic? And who doesn't know someone who's been afflicted with it or who has not died from it? And who doesn't know that it's worldwide? And so we can use that example concerning what a pandemic is. The United Nations said it was a pandemic before COVID-19 even emerged on the scene. That's how prevalent it is. And we see the safeguards that are being put in place worldwide to try to contain it and to try to eradicate it. That's how pervasive domestic violence is. And it's been here a lot longer than COVID.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I like to say that domestic violence is a pandemic inside of a pandemic. It's been happening, and COVID-19 has definitely increased it. But I want to piggyback off of something Carolyn said. Like she said, getting it into the schools and things like that, but also getting it into the churches as well. Getting so every office of any minute Catholic, Christian, Muslim, it doesn't matter what the faith is, you can go in their office and they have a pamphlet there, some information, an advocate that they can connect you to. It's not a family secret.
No.
It's not a family secret. What happens in this house, if it's hurting somebody, it needs to be spoken about,
Right.
and also creating a safe place. If I know that, speaking to you is going to be safe for me, it's a safe space for me. If we create safe spaces where people can be vulnerable and share this is happening, that's important too. And to be believed, oftentimes the victims are re-traumatized by the police department, by the judges, by the court systems, when it comes to child act, all these things. Believe them, and then there should be actions and consequences to what happens. Oftentimes, they were, I've read it somewhere where they said, I could hit you, Cheryle, I could hit you and go to jail longer than if my spouse hit me. And so why is that okay? It has to be where, and I love what Dwayne talked about, where he's from, it's mandated that a file has to be charged. And while some victims may not like that, because most of the time they're going to take their charge back. But if they are forced to follow through with the charge, not realizing that in the end it does help them, because it gives them a place to be safe for a season of time where they can clear themselves, get unfogged, and maybe be able to get to a safe place. But also, my last but not least is organizations and businesses, having resources, having someone in HR that's familiar with domestic violence. I worked at one of the biggest school districts here, and no one had any idea that I was being abused. No one knew anything. Right. Why? Was there a phone number that I can call? Was there a resource? So there should be ongoing trainings in these organizations where people can get the resources and help that they need. And we don't expect everyone to know everything. Just know someone who knows the answers for the questions that you have.
How to pass it on. Yeah.
Right. And you know what? The other thing is, even in seminaries, one of the things that we were scheduled to do was to go to Kenya and to provide training to 20 churches under a bishop that we know there, because they reached out and said they felt horrible about how they have been handling or not handling domestic violence. And he acknowledged, we just don't know what to do. We don't know what to do or how to respond or how to feel. And so I think seminaries need to have training concerning this. I think individual denominations that have their own in-house, seminary training, it needs to be a part of it. I think that ministry leaders need to not wait until October and pass out a pamphlet and speak about it for 30 seconds. I think, why can't you talk about it once a month? Why can't you do that? Why can't you go after that? Why can't that be a series? We have series on everything else. Why can't we have a series on that? And rightly dividing, the scripture. So there's a lot that has to be done. but there are a lot of us out here trying to make it happen. And I think it's important that we keep one another encouraged and that we help lend some balance to one another, that we are aware of what our own biases are, what our own hangups are, how far we can go. And I think it's important for us to make it clear to people that everybody can do something. Now, 20% of domestic violence homicides are not even the victim. So when we're telling people to get involved, I try to be careful to tell them, this can be dangerous. You could become a target. At least one person in that relationship is going to hate your guts, okay? They may say who you are under pressure. So we have to have appropriate boundaries in place so that we can maintain our own personal safety as well. But I try to be honest with people about the dangers. Everybody maybe can't have someone come to their house that's fleeing a situation. Okay, I've done it, but I wouldn't advise everybody else to do it, right? And then I've done it on a case-by-case basis. It depends on the circumstances. You can educate yourself about what the resources are, though. You can tell them to call Lisa if you're in Orlando. You can say, reach out to Carolyn. You can say, oh, you're in Alabama, contact Misty. She'll be able to help you with some resources in your area. So anybody that we're talking to, they can at least do that. When we're active on social media, they can share our post. They can do that. They can help us financially. They can donate to us. They can offer their skills, whatever it is that they're good at. Someone's a writer, like Karis is on here now. She's a journalist. I'm tapping into that. I'm tapping into her skill set, right? Because she knows what she's doing. This is her area of expertise. So there are so many ways that people can help us in this quest to eradicate domestic violence. And education, I think, is the foundation, and we have to keep going, and we have to keep talking.